Hello, and welcome to Expose Yourself to Art, the show where we talk with artists about the creative process, and we talk with those who facilitate art and the important work they do. Normally, I am a co host with David Schroeder, but today I'm going to be interviewing him as our guest. David Schroeder, as you probably know, is the executive director of the Stanislaus Arts Council, and I'm going to say no more because I'm very keen to get into conversation with him and see the images he's shown. So welcome, David.
Hey,
Hello.
here we are. I'm in a little bit different role today. Made me nervous all week thinking about
Aw.
this. Talk-
Well, I'm excited about this. You know, I love to hear about people's early lives because that's fundamental to the rest of their life, the trajectory they find themselves on. So when you look back, what were some of your earliest interests and influences? Maybe artistic, maybe not.
Yes. Yeah, actually, like most of the people we've talked to, when I look back, I was always aware of art. Uh, when I was young in grade school, people asked me what I was going to do in life. It was always, well, I'm either going to be or a jock or an artist. I'm either going to play football and baseball or be an artist, or maybe I'll do all of those things because
Mm-hmm.
this was so far in the past that athletes weren't paid a lot of money to play professional sports at that time. And I had this
Imagine that.
crazy, yeah, I had this crazy idea that if I played professional sports, I'd need something to make a living, and I thought that would be art.
Oh,
Which,
that's sweet.
which,
That really
yeah,
is. I wish.
yeah,
In a perfect world, you know.
yeah. It shows you how naive I was, and I was encouraged a little bit. I could draw, and teachers would ask me to do murals on their walls, and
Mm.
things such as that.
Uh-huh.
But that lasted until adolescence, when lots of things happened. Girls. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I went to work as an adolescent. Um,
Oh.
all those things, that were important to me kind of had to take a back seat. Again, it was so far back, I don't know if you remember, it was the age of Sputnik. The
Oh,
Russians had,
I
you know,
remember.
beat us to space, and
Mm-hmm.
art was, kind of shoved down the ladder, and, take your science and math classes. And
Mm-hmm.
that's
Your
good. So
new
anyway,
math.
yeah, so anyway, uh, yeah, that's kind of how it started for me, or how it started and then went away. But
Hmm.
as I've discovered, preparing for this, looking back at some of my earlier work or earlier experiences, I've always had a very conflicted relationship with art, uh, both personally and, yeah, professionally, I guess you could say. And let me show you just an example of what I'm talking about here. Maybe I can bring on one of my first pictures here.
When did you do this, do you think?
I think I was like a young teen, you know, um, and I remember this reminded me of those things. I don't know if you ever saw them, matchbook covers. They would have a picture of something and it would say, "Do you have artistic skill? Draw this, send it in,
Oh, yes.
and then we'll sell you this art course."
Mm-hmm.
That's basically, so this could have been one of those things. And I remember showing it to people, or people saw it and they say, "Oh, you can draw."
You do have
And
artistic talent.
I do, yeah. It's like, but I was confused by that because I just saw this as a skill.
Hmm.
And when people would say, "Oh, you're very creative," I went, "Not really. I just copied something."
Hmm.
And I was like, I guess I would say I was an artistic snob or something, because I'd say, I really have nothing to say. I just drew this horse. It's not creative. It's just copying. But so between all of those things, art pretty much disappeared for me
Hmm.
uh, during those middle years. Actually, in high school, I did get into singing and acting a bit, which persisted into college. Um, and in college, oh, here, I've got to show you this one because it's the only thing I have from there.
Gosh, you're good looking.
Oh, geez, yeah. Um, I like to look at it too. My hair is dark. And I don't
Yeah.
even know I don't even know who this person is anymore. But this is the only thing I have left. It was a publicity still for some of the acting and singing that I was doing then. And I got into it to the degree that when I graduated actually my degree was in psychology. People were very surprised by that because I'd been on stage so much that they thought I was an actor. That's where I would go. But art kept creeping in because I remember when I graduated, or about the time I graduated, I'd been studying psychology, I'd been doing a lot of acting and singing, and I went to the drama coach at the college. This was Chico State. And I said, hey, I have to ask you a question. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do after this, but I've read about something called psychodrama. And maybe that's the way to put these things together, psychology and acting. And he just looked at me with his blank look and basically said, what's that? And don't you want to just be an actor? It's like, yeah, but, anyway, the story that went with that is that I applied to graduate school in psychology and I applied to some acting schools. And the acting schools wanted money, many thousands of dollars that I didn't have. And surprisingly, the graduate schools in psychology sent me money and said, come study with us. So it was like it was a no-brainer. So once again, art disappeared from my life, and I went off to graduate school and studied psychology and became a clinical psychologist. And once I graduated, I, got a job in a clinic and became a therapist. And it was actually at that point that I actually started learning about art.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was working at Emmanuel Hospital, which had a mental health center at the time. And they were looking for, an art therapist, occupational therapist, someone like that. And the staff hired this person, name was Mary Thomas, and she was an art therapist. She came directly to our clinic from Zurich, Switzerland, where she'd been studying with Carl Jung. I mean,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, big name, important, at least Carl Jung is a big name, important person. And she had actually sat at Carl Jung's feet and been in seminars with him and all that sort of stuff. And so anyway, after a couple of days, I stopped in and I said, so tell me what art therapy is all about. And I sat in with some people and she asked us to just kind of scribble or paint blindly. And so this is what I came up with. I came up with other things, but they all looked like this, and I remember at the end of talking to her, I grabbed it and crumpled it up and threw it in the wastebasket. And she said, well, why'd you do that? And I said, well, it's junk. Oh. I said, this is nothing. And so she did one of these, I don't know, hokey or magical things that, you only see this in movies, She carefully took it out of the wastebasket. She uncrumpled it. She smoothed it out. She put it in her desk drawer and closed the drawer and looked at me and said, I will save this until you learn to recognize and honor the artist within yourself.
Well, good for her.
And I said, artist, I'm not an artist, It's like, what are you talking about? I've never sold anything. I can draw, but she said, what makes you think that art has anything to do, or being an artist has anything to do with selling your work? And I said, well, doesn't it? She said, oh, you don't get, you have so much to learn. But, in the meantime, I'd also been doing a lot of doodling, and this was my response to my art.
Okay.
Reminded me of, church
Uh-huh.
woman or my mother. Well, isn't that special? And it's like, I wouldn't quit my day job just yet.
Wow. Shades of
So,
Jean Moreau.
yeah. So anyway, let me just get rid of some of these things here so I can show you some other things that happened after that. So anyway, what happened after that is she said, no, you're an artist and you're an art therapist and you don't know it. And so they started sending me clients to work with artistically, to use art to work with them. And then that's when I started learning about the power of art and what art was capable of. I mean, sometimes art is just, you can use it for diagnosis. This is one of my favorite ones. This was a young boy came in. I said, do you like to draw? He said, yeah. And choose a color. So he chose black. I said, would you want to draw me a picture of a person or a tree or a house or something? He said, I'll draw a person. So he drew this person. And I said, are you finished? He said, yeah, I'm finished. He put his paintbrush down. I was like, I'm finished. Went, okay. And then I wasn't quite sure what to make of this because I hadn't learned to talk with artists yet, especially young ones. And so when his mother came in to pick him up, I said, so your son drew this. And I'm not quite sure I understand it. And she took one look at it and said, oh, that's his father. You're married to the headless. And she said, no. We just moved here from some other state, to California. And my husband's been working 20 hours a day, and my son hasn't seen him for like 6 months. So he's probably telling you the truth. And so it's like, well, geez, what do I do with this? And what we did was quite simple. I just asked the father to bring him to his next sessions. And after, 2 or 3 sessions of his father just showing up, and we talked about all kinds of things like dinosaurs, like young kids do. And then I had another session with the kid alone. And do you want to draw me a picture of a person? And it's like, yep, there we go.
Wow, what a difference.
Yeah. So, the art was just the way of kind of diagnosing what was going on and tell me what was going on. And then I learned that, art can also lead you to something. So this was done by a fellow therapist. He was a student. He was kind of a wise ass. And he said, oh, you're doing art therapy. And he came in, he did this. And he said, so what does it mean? And of course, I said, I don't know. I don't have a clue what this means. You did it. It's like, what are you doing to me? And so he said, well, what do I do now? And I said, well, keep doing that. Just do another one, do another one, do it. And he did like a series of, I must have been 5 or 6. And then he came up with this one.
Oh, my.
And it's like, so what is this? And he became very tearful, maybe. And he said, that's me. He said, and all this stuff around me is intruding, is forcing. These are all the forces of the other things in my life that are kind of keeping me penned in, penned down. And so anyway, after this, we didn't do art so much anymore as talk, but it led him to what we should talk about. So, but the real important thing that I learned about art was things like this. this is a very simple task that I'd ask somebody to do. You lay them on a giant sheet of butcher paper and trace around them. And then say, okay, so this is your outline, fill it in with something, or do something with it. And this particular person didn't fill it in, but drew this kind of ominous black creature force that was surrounding her and holding her captive. And what was interesting about this is we talked a little bit about what the darkness was, but it didn't go back into talking. This is where I learned about how art can heal things all by itself. She kept working artistically with the black. She was an actual art student. And so she kept using black in her artistic life, so to speak. And she did just a whole series of this black intrusive stuff. And it eventually evolved into, so instead of trying to get rid of the black, she incorporated it into her work. And by incorporating it into her work, it changed her.
In what way?
It was no longer threatening. It no longer dominated her. And it also showed me something else, which was quite magical as far as art is concerned, which is that we talked a lot about her art. We didn't talk a lot about her life. And at the end, she was better, that the art did the transforming by itself, not our talking. And that's one thing I discovered working with a number of people. For example, I worked with some writers and poets, and anybody who had anything to do with art, they sent to me at this point. And I had one person say to me after about 5 sessions, I'm really disappointed in you, doctor, because you haven't asked me what my problem is. All we've done is talk about my art. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. What's your problem? And the person said, well, that's just it. It isn't there anymore. So it's kind of like working through problems in your dream life. And then, going back to my mentor, Mary, when I talked to her about that, she would, it's like, what is this all about? And she said, art therapy is about finding the medium that goes with the person, that allows them access to their psyche, to their inner life. And once you have access, they have the energy to make the transformations. She said, it's not that complicated as far as your end. You need to learn to just kind of stay out of other people's business and facilitate them moving on, telling them to do more. What's next? How do you talk to an artist? She said, don't ask them what it means. All art, it's like a journey. Where did it start? What'd you do next? What did you encounter along the way? Is it over? If it's not over, well, then let's continue the journey. If it's over, tell me, So it's like you have to learn to speak the language of the artist, as opposed to asking them to translate it into talk. And we all know this. I mean, it makes sense to me once you think about it, that, the basis of communication is primarily physical, some sound, and very little words, very few words. Unless you're a poet, of course, or an artist, then your words mean something. But for most of us, they're just kind of icing on the cake. The real work is done somewhere else. At least that's what I got out of it.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And what important work. I mean, that's really beautiful. It's a process of revelation, self-revelation. And I mean, it's such a great way to enable someone to utilize the power of their own creativity to find their own solutions and change their direction, or at least have a clearer idea of where they are and where they want to go.
There you go. Thank you. You're a poet, and you put things into words that are more articulate than I stumble around with sometimes. This I just threw in there because this was another staff person I worked with, and
Wow.
the same process, just messing around. A lot of the art we did, graphic art, we did, started with scribbles.
Mm-hmm.
And then evolved into something. And his scribbles evolved into this. It was a memory he had when he would go under ether, when he had operations as a child. This giant bird would come and take him away.
Huh.
And as he proceeded, it became more defined. And this became like his spirit guide and led him through a torrent or an outpouring of art. I mean, he just created like 25, 30 paintings within a month or something like that. That just,
Right.
and it took him all over his psyche. So you're right. It is a way of getting a person to utilize their own power and their own creativity to deal with their problems. And then this is also interesting, at least to me. People got word of this, and they came and did some newspaper articles on me. There's one that was in Modesto Journal. No, it doesn't exist anymore. This was in the Bee, and again, it was like, hey, this is great. For my ego, it's like, oh, look, I get my name in the paper. But at the same time, again, here's this, conflicted thing in me. It's like, why am I there? The real art is done by the people I'm working with. And the real expert is this Mary, my mentor, Mary. Why isn't she here? These are the people. So it's like, I guess I'm a front man. It's like, maybe from all my acting, it's like, nah, you can stand up, you can be the front man for this, even though it's not totally about you. So it's like, yeah, kind of like being the.
You've been showing me art that was created by others who probably would not think of themselves as artists either.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Probably. Yeah. The art that comes from art therapy, by the way, sometimes resembles art, sometimes it doesn't. Oh, and I should say before I move on from this is that I ended up working with artists of all genres. I mean, I worked with writers, I worked with songwriters, I worked with people who were into movement. And what I discovered with that, or what I learned from that, is that the artistic process is pretty much the same if you switch from one genre to another. And just to show you that this is, again, my stuff. I would sit with people we're painting, and I would scribble myself. And over 20 years, my scribbling, actually, I call these color doodles, became.
That's lovely.
I would, I might start this in a session and then, put it aside when I talked with somebody, and then finish it later, at night. And there was one, and here's another. And being curious, I call these doodles. They're just things that just kind of would happen, based on scribbles. And I remember after I'd done this for a number of years, taking it to my friend Mary and saying, so what is this all about? And she said, I don't have any idea. So I actually put them together in a book with, it's called, Into the Fire. And the book consisted of these color doodles on one page and my line drawing doodles on the other, with my line drawing doodles commenting on the art. It was like the line doodles were all these voices in my head. When I would look at something, what my response would be. So not sure whatever came of it, but I doodling. And what's interesting about that work was that I got to a place where I did this.
That's I think wonderful.
And there, so here's what again is confusing to me. The little voices in my head were saying, "Oh, finally, something I can identify, something what's there." And this is the last one that I ever did.
Oh my.
It's almost like I emerged from the colors and came back into reality. And it's like, oh, I guess I don't need to do this anymore. I mean, it's a very, very strange thing.
It's an amazing process.
Yeah. So.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, so what did all this do to me or for me or whatever is changed jobs and started working for the Department of Mental Health. And one of the jobs that I took on there was to be the head of the education prevention program. And which means that, I was the person that was supposed to schedule, talks, a speakers bureau to go out into the community and talk about art. But that seemed kind of boring to me and to other people. And I remember getting together with a group of people and saying, isn't there something we could do that would be more interesting than just sitting and giving talks to people? And my acting background kind of kicked in. And we came up with this idea of, why don't we go out and put on shows about things? And this resulted in a program that was called, we ended up calling ourselves Loose Association. And what we did is got some money and hired a improvisational theater trainer who trained a bunch of mental health professionals in the art of improvisation. And so we would go to places and instead of giving a talk, we would do a show based on whatever they were interested in. For example, we would go a theater game, make a scene. We'd go to a group of people, and divorce was big then. This was like the 60s and 70s when the divorce rate was climbing and people were concerned about it. And so, yeah, we're interested in divorce. And it's like, oh, well, let's find a way of talking about it. So build a scene, and people, one by one, we would go out and say, so who am I in this scene? And it's like, oh, well, you're the husband, you're the wife, you're the bimbo secretary who seduced the husband, you're the attorney, you're the kids. And then I went out once and said, you're the family dog. And so, I remember that scene as I did a lot of licking and leg humping, and, it's like, so everybody had a good time, and we basically covered the issue of divorce. Or you name the subject, we did a show about it. And again, somehow word got out, and they wrote us up in, I think this some national magazine, Innovations, yeah. And I put this in here because in reading it, I'd forgotten about some of the things that we did. And some of these were amazing. They're still amazing to me. We ended up working with the police department, helping train police officers to deal with disturbed people. And we would act it out. We would create scenes for them to come in and solve. In fact, at one point, they used us for a final exam at the police academy. In other words, we would create, for example, domestic violence scenes, and the police would have to come in and deal with, the combatants, so to speak, or we would create a scene with somebody who was schizophrenic, and they would have to come in and deal with it. And it went on from there. We were also employed by the prison system. We went into a couple of prisons to do shows, and were asked back to train inmates to create scared straight shows where they would go out and talk about, to kids at risk about things like that. And it was like, whoa, this was, the people who were involved besides myself, and you'll see some of them in just a minute. How would I say it? It's very engaging. It's like, wow, for me, it's like, oh, this is the meaning with art. This is using art to actually do something, to have an impact on the world, to, not just create a pretty picture, but to actually, and to see how art would affect normal people, prisoners, policemen, and the same group, not yet. And what evolved after time is we started going to conferences, and this was a conference in the Bay Area, and we created a special show. It's called Improvisations on Madness is what it was. It was a story of a schizophrenic young man, and these are a couple of our players, Bruce Ebert and Cynthia Chapa, Kevin Freitas. And so Bruce, was the young schizophrenic boy, and Kevin was, the voice inside of his head, and Cynthia was the social worker. I mean, this is just one scene. But our improvisations worked into actually creating shows that we then took the shows around. And one of the most important shows that we did, or the most popular, was what was this? The impossibility of it all. It was about stress. Stress was big. And this is the group that did one of the first shows together. And this is Ali Overstress. And Ali Overstress acted out the role of somebody who was, trying to do too much with too little, and, had time pressures and had a heart attack.
Oh, gee.
And the other people were, the show ended with this Ron Gilbert on the guitar singing "Friends Are Good Medicine." And this is like a real overview. And a lot of these people stuck together over the years, traveled a lot together. We got on the kind of conference circuit, so to speak.
Is that Phil Fincher?
That's Phil Fincher.
Yeah, I've been on stage with him. Wonderful fellow. John
Yost, Cynthia Chapa, Joan Eder. I'm copping out as an old man here. Ramona Harris, maybe, I don't know who else. Anyway, here we are, and I included this picture because there's somebody else you should recognize here, which is on my right is Keith Boggs. He's the president.
Oh, that's
president.
Keith?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Of the Arts Council, and Keith was our sound man. Keith, if you didn't know, used to have a rock band, heavy metal rock band.
Well, I know he's a musician, but I didn't know that you two worked together. And what a revelation!
So we met long time ago. Yeah. And another thing that came out of this was we created a puppet company that worked in schools. I think it was the Hippy Dippy Puppet Company. That's what it was. This was the 1970s. We were all,
I could tell.
Hippy Dippy. And
that's great.
So and this became very popular, extremely popular. I think at the end of the first year, we had performed for 11,000 elementary school students.
Oh, that's
Uh,
astonishing.
and using the same techniques that we used in the improvisational company, Loose Association, we would go in and do interactive puppet shows about certain subjects. Again, just to use the example of divorce, there was a very popular little scene where we always did, I have two daddies, and, dealing with the feelings around, everybody's talking about their mom and dad. And that actually came from my daughter taught me about this, because instead of being embarrassed, I mean, I was divorced, and, my kids taught me. And instead of being embarrassed by it or put down by it, when somebody said, "Oh, your parents are divorced," she said, "No, I have two daddies." And, put a very positive spin on it. So we learned to incorporate those kind of things into these works. And then for a brief moment, we had a TV show called Living Room. Yeah. And so what happened with all of this, at least from a personal standpoint, was that I remember being called in by the director of mental health at the time and saying, I thought you were a clinical psychologist therapist. Who hired you as an actor or an artist? And, you need to stop this or think about it. Or
oh, no.
Yeah. So the group continued. I was kind of put in a position to resign. Not my day job, but to back out of some of this stuff. And but it continued on without me for a number of years. Cynthia Chapa pretty much took over, and there were a whole bunch of new people that came on. I don't have pictures of them, so I apologize for that. But they kept the program going for another couple of years.
Oh, I'm glad.
But we had to stop the puppet company. It was taking too much time. It was booked like 2 times a day, and the people who were doing the puppet shows were mental health professionals who, see, this is how I got in trouble, were ignoring their day job in order to do this kind of work.
Because they were helping people.
Yeah, well, that's my view. That was my view. It's like, but we have all these patients to be seen. It's like
it's like there's only one way.
Yeah.
I'm sure you did so much good before you were told to stop it.
Well, that was just for me personally. Okay.
Well, for all the people.
So when but you can't keep an artist down. So one of the things that happened in this, where it was a purgatorial time that I was in, was that because we had been doing all these art things, and I worked for the county, I was included in a group who was brought together to create the Arts Council for Stanislaus County. I think it was 1970 something that California created their first Arts Council in the state, and they were, encouraging. They were giving money to counties to have arts councils of their own. And I remember being on this committee and with many other important artistic people in the community. I remember Betty Bell Smith and getting into arguments with her about, she always thought we needed a center like the Gallo Center. And I remember arguing with her and saying, but we need something to help artists. What about the small groups? And she was saying, no, we need to put our name on the map with this big center. So, eventually she won because we have the Gallo Center, of course. And I'm not putting it down. It was just that at the time I was, grassroots kind of person. And But anyway, that led to hiring this person,
Grace Lieberman.
Grace Lieberman, our first Arts Council director. And she stayed with us for a couple of years and then, needed money, took a job somewhere else. And then she came back and finished out as the Arts Council director for a number of years. And the end of that story is kind of where all this will lead us, which is, she did that until she could no longer, her ill health kind of stopped her from doing it. But, and when money ran out from the city and the state and the county, she actually took out a second mortgage on her house to pay for the expenses of the Arts Council. I mean, she is our Arts Council person.
Mm-hmm. Saint of the Arts Council, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I went to her memorial at the state. Oh my gosh, it was packed.
It was packed, yeah. Anyway, so what happened was, I did my penance working and I took on a new program and somebody said, whatever happened to loose association? Because by then, and I don't know what happened to it because I was in purgatory, they kind of dwindled away.
Oh.
And it's like, we need to get back doing that again. So in my new position, we had a revival and it was called the Wellness Warriors. I was running the wellness program for the county. And so we started out doing the same thing, same kinds of things, some of the same people, there's Phil Fincher again, and, Cindy, John Yost, Marilyn Backlund, Joan Eder, Ron Gilbert, and we all got together again and went on the road again. This time, we were a little bit, we knew more how to, manage things. So, and of course, we revitalized, the impossibility of it all. There's Ollie Overstressed. We wrote a couple of new shows. By the way, a way of writing a show is very interesting with an improvisational group because they take on characters and then you have them get on stage and act out scenes and there's your dialogue. You save the good stuff, throw away the rest. So these shows were kind of group efforts. There would be an outline and then, the characters would speak for themselves. And we created, this was a show about motivation in the workplace. And that became, again, these shows were done for large conventions, so to speak. For example, we got asked to, this is something we took to Palm Springs at a big convention for workplace wellness or something like that. And I'm surprised we weren't being asked to be shut down again because we were always criticized for, why are you performing in Stockton? Why are you performing in Bakersfield? We're paying your money, your salary is in Stanislaus County, come on. So anyway, every once in a while, I'd be part of the show too. This is part of Juice, motivating people in the workplace. Put together another show, High Maintenance.
Oh, they're the cows.
Yeah, dealing with difficult people. So that became a big hit. That actually took us to New York, where we made a presentation and did some training about how to do these techniques for education. And that led to, well, here's just another playbill. Relating 9 to 5 is another workplace kind of show. So, again, it's using art to influence, to create a message, to influence an audience.
To make things better.
Yeah. Oh, this is in here because at some point, see, I never lost contact with my friend Mary from when I met her years ago at Emmanuel Hospital. And at one point I was with her and she said, you need to write. She would always tell, it's like, point me. And I said, and at that point, I think the mental health department wanted a newsletter. So I took on the editorial task, writing some things. And then that led to this wellness newsletter, The Art and Soul of Living, which was published for county employees for like 15 years.
Wow.
And, utilizing, again, some of the same people, but utilizing people within the staff to write the articles. And, like I said, I did more of an editorial job here, finding people to write and, organizing and putting it in order. And anyway, that all continued until I retired. At which point, I took a trip to, ended up going up the Amazon on a cruise and came back. And I had some pictures. Oh, by the way, all of these pictures came about. Right now, people think of me as being a photographer, but I actually bought a camera to take pictures of the things that we were doing, not to be a photographer. And so on this trip, I took a bunch of pictures of the Amazon, and I said, well, maybe people should see this, and I went to the camera center, and they had this space, and they said, oh, we've always wanted this gallery in our spare space. So if you help put it together, you can have a show. And once I did a show of my Amazon pictures, they asked me to stay on and kind of run this photography center. And
Nice.
what I liked about it is a couple things. Again, for the community, it became a hangout for photographers. Here's Al Golub and so be photographers. Yeah. And they were kind of there. Yeah. So Mendoza, Bill Harris. The other thing it put me in touch with was collaborating with other arts groups. We put on shows at the Gallows Center. But the most important thing for me, I say most important, the most impactful thing was, for me, was meeting this guy.
Yes, Sam Piersdorf.
Sam Piersdorf, yes. Poet, ninja poet.
Ninja poet.
Yeah. Very popular instructor at MJC. Organized the Ill List, which has become a nationally known poetry event that's held here in Modesto every year.
And instrumental in the state theater's growth and new projects there. He's the president of the board now, isn't he, at the state?
He is. And what somebody said is like, I can't remember, somebody suggested to me, why don't you put photography and poetry together? And so Sam and I sat down together and came up with this program called Collision, the collision of words and pictures. And how about a poet and a photographer working together on the same piece of art, starting with a picture or a poem. And this was our first collision show. I always tell people that it surprised me how popular poetry was in this area. That our first show was standing room only. And Sam always reminds me is that we didn't have any chairs. So that's why it was standing room only. But we did pack the museum, I mean, the gallery with that. And that's a show that's, well, you know about because you participated many years. And we're on what? Collision number 7. We do it about every other year. Now it's moved from the Photographer's Gallery over to the Mislin Gallery. And here's a couple of pictures from Collision number 7. And we've evolved a little bit. We now have project the photograph behind the poet. This poet brought her own drummer. It was
Udelka Solano. And she was paired with Crystal Lysick, right?
Yes, yeah.
I had the good fortune to be able to work with you to
you and
find
I worked
poets
together
and
on
pair
that.
them up with photographers. It was a wonderful experience.
And here's another one.
And Angela Drew.
Angela Drew. And there's the whole group. And just to show you that it still packs them in.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And the next big thing that seemed to have an impact was, there I am, I'm being impacted. I took a trip to Cuba with a photographer friend. And the idea is if you were allowed to go to Cuba, you had to come back and do something. What are you going to do to educate people about your trip? And so we put on this wild and woolly show called The Romance of Old Havana, working with another local arts figure, John Griswold, to bring in, what did we have? We had 3 Cuban musical groups. We had a Cuban dance group. We had a cigar salesperson. We had Cuban food. It turned out to be quite an event, which a lot of people, still remember. But the whole thing was, the idea was, instead of telling people about our event and just showing some pictures, why don't we create Cuba for people here? And let them have this experience. We plan to do another one after that. Of course, there was ran into some difficulties with finding a venue and money and all that sort of stuff. So this was our one and only claim to fame. Oh, this is what we did with photography. This was at the Marty Peterson Center. We recreated the entryway. Cuba is known for classic old American cars, and I threw this picture in because these are some other people that are very important to the arts in our community. There's Grace Lieberman again, and Tony Mislin, who supported the Mislin Gallery for many years. The Mislin Gallery, as most people see it today, wouldn't be there without Tony's support. I mean, it's incredibly generous that he would back us that way. Just a couple of more pictures from the event, dancers. Got the audience involved. What grew out of that is something else to talk about very quickly, so I see our time is up, is having worked together with Griswold, we came up with this idea of that somebody needs to focus on the arts in our community. And this was, I guess, the way it impacted me, this was a magnificent failure.
Oh.
Yeah, we decided that the arts needed to have a magazine. So we did this, what would I say, glossy magazine that you could hold in your hand, called it Focus On. What was inside was articles by local arts people. Here's an article on the theater by Jack Souza. What else do we have here? Oh, here's an article on poetry by Gillian Wagner, yeah. Featured local artists like Jordy. Here's a jazz article. So anyway, the reason it was a magnificent failure is that it cost money. And we ran out of money out of the first issue. We were going to sell ads, but we never could get enough together to go on. We have the second issue in the can, but two things stopped us. One was money, and two is the digital world. You know, that everybody went online, and this is, you know, magazines are pretty much going out of business all over the place. You know, so as far as advertising in magazines and all that sort of stuff, it's kind of been, you know, on a downward spiral. What was next on the list here? Again, following the Camera Center closed the Photographers Gallery. The Camera Center closed, and with it, obviously closed Photographers Gallery. But by then, I was in touch with a lot of photographers, and we decided, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have, you know, celebrate the photographic arts in Modesto 1 month a year? And so we came up with this, where we, for the month of February, found 22 venues in town to display photography all during the month of February. And so that was, we did that for a couple of years. It's a lot of work. But what that led to is, I think it was right about then, Mislin Gallery. I'd always been a member there, but it was then that they said, you know, why don't you kind of take over? Why don't you get on the board and, you know, become board president? Which was, you know, one of those strange stories that keeps happening in my life.
Well, you get things done.
Well, I was at an event, and I think I've been drinking. I don't drink a lot, but, you know.
When you do.
I had a couple, yeah. And the president of the gallery at that time, Tony Pooler, came up to me and said, hey, how would you like to take over as president? And I said, yeah, sure, okay. and so he stood up in front of this group of people and said, hey, folks, we just found a new president. David, get up here and tell us your plans for the gallery. Like,
no wonder you don't drink often.
That's right. It's like, geez. All I could think of was saying is oh, I hope I don't screw this up.
Oh.
I mean, it was like, Tony, what did you do to me? I mean, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have just, you know, blurted out, yeah, sure, I've got nothing else to do for the next, you know. But anyway, once doing that, we brought, this is another version of our Photo Modesto, our celebration of photography. Once it got to Mislin, the first couple of years we did independent of Mislin. This is, you know, kind of a thing I put in the front window at Mislin. And then we also started bringing in photographers of different, you know, talents, different ideas. I heard Bill Harris. He did a show on the circus. This is QT Long. He brought in a show on the national parks.
Gorgeous.
This is Aaron Draper, Modesto boy, who's since moved up to Chico. And he did a show on the homeless people in town.
That's right.
Underexposed. Adrian Mendoza, he did a show on, you know, Modesto history. Anyway, and then this popped up.
I recognize that title.
You recognize that, yeah. Running the gallery, we wanted to expand our impact on the community. So, you know, they had already started this program, which is to bring in artists to talk about their art. And so I said, well, why don't we pump it up a little bit, And I started scheduling in a lot of different artists. And what's interesting about this is you'll see on February 13th, Adrian Mendoza did his show. On March 12th, David Chapman did not do his show. And none of the other people did their show because COVID hit.
Oh.
And that's when you and I went online.
Mm-hmm.
And and we're still going with this. We've done about 60 some interviews with artists in the area, artists who have come here. And
yeah, I love it. It's such a great way to
this is
meet
who's up
artists.
next. Yeah.
Very good.
So we're kind of, at the hour. So I'm going to just skip way ahead here. We have the Grace Lieberman Cabaret Series, where we bring in people from different performance venues. So somewhere in there, what would I say? Arts organizations always need money. And a couple of us were looking around and saying, where is there money that can support these artistic things that are going on in our community? And discovered that in talking to the California Arts Council, discovered that Stanislaus County no longer had an arts council. So we applied and got a grant to reestablish the Arts Council in Stanislaus County. And the money arrived just in time for COVID to shut everything down. But, in a lull, we put together a big event that called Celebration of the Arts, where we assembled a lot of the arts people in town to talk about reformulating the Arts Council. And we have some important people here, like there you are. And then we have Madam Mayor. She was there.
Yes.
And here we have the president of the Arts Council,
Keith Boggs.
And this all took place because of another big art supporter in town, Brad Hahn. Took place in his backyard. He made pizza for everybody. And Roy Stevens got our COVID award for doing the most with his arts group in the time of COVID.
That was the race?
Yes, yeah.
Marvelous.
And we had, lots of, entertainment, young people entertainment, young opera singer, young cellist. And then, so what's happened since we finally got together, and this, we need to kind of run through this, is the state of California made $60 million available for art. And their idea was that, 80% of the money that they made available had to go for artist salaries. In other words, they were trying to have an impact on the starving artist stereotype. And we got together with two other counties, Merced County and Tuolumne County, and formed a coalition and applied for our chunk of the money, which is, we got $4.2 million to bring into our three counties. Stanislaus County's portion was 1.8 or 1.6 million. And the idea was to solicit projects based around certain themes, like COVID, like health issues, water issues, human rights issues,
engagement.
community engagement, yeah. and
Environment.
and to focus on artists living in the lower quartile of the California Healthy Living Index, which, basically, the undersupported, underserved
Mhm.
groups. And so, yeah, we participated. We put out an ad. We got 172 applicants.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
so great.
And unfortunately, because of the allocation of funds, even though it seemed like a lot of money, we were able to fund 17 of them. And I know you can't see them here, but here's a list of. And you mentioned who's the first one on there? Jose Manriquez. He's going to be our guest on Expose Yourself to Art next week.
Oh, marvelous.
Yeah. And so what we've done, I mean, not only did they get the money to do their projects, and we'll talk more about this later, but I'm going to schedule as many of these people as I can for our Expose Yourself to Art project so that the people in our community can get to know them and see what they're doing.
Good.
And very quickly, there are a couple other programs that are immensely important. The class community liaison for art in Stanislaus County is run by Linda Knoll. This is to counter the trend that has been going on in our schools is to diminish art in schools.
Yeah.
To take it out of the curriculum. And the class projects puts teachers back in the schools, especially back into schools of the, let's say, underserved communities.
Mm-hmm.
And Linda has done an incredible job. I talked to her not long ago about, the impact. And she said, yeah, last year, we impacted the lives of 17,000 students.
Wow.
I mean, so this is an amazing program.
Indeed.
And another program very quickly is Midland Gallery. The Arts Council sponsors this. This is where I started my presentation today, is art therapy. We have a full-blown art therapy program. It's focused more on group than on individuals than, let's say, my work. But it's for cancer survivors, financed by Memorial Hospital, run by Galen Martin. And the things that I talked about earlier about the impact that art has on people, it continues to have an impact on the people who attend. They do group projects together. And as a way of wrapping up and saying, where do we go next? Hey, the 16th, all you people out there. The Stanislaus Arts is doing a cabaret about jazz. Nice. Something that we haven't done before. We're going to focus on, this is a person who does the Billie Holiday project, recreates Billie Holiday for an evening. We're working on this, which is what we hope is a gigantic fundraiser, because the money that Tony Mislin has so graciously given us over the years comes to an end, with his passing. His foundation has decided not to continue to support us. Yeah, I mean that doesn't diminish their generosity or anything, but it's like
certainly
things change. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have to raise a lot of money. There'll be more information about this coming out soon, and I want to end with this. It's a picture taken me by Adrian Mendoza, exposing myself to art, as I always have. So anyway.
Well, that was marvelous. I'm so glad we had you on as the guest, because I learned so much and you've done so much. So this was much needed.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's putting myself in a different perspective than another part of me was always concerned about my own art. It's like, hey, look at me, I can take pictures. Look at me, I can sing. Look at me, I can dance. And it turns out that the most successful thing is working with other people and other people's art. As you say, observing art, facilitating this kind of thing. So,
well, thank you, David.
this made me kind of reconfigure my view of myself in many ways. So thanks for having me, and I'll come back and I'll be a good partner next week when we talk to someone else.
Well, you were a wonderful guest. Thank you so much, David.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if I can get us out of here. Here.